Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, wrapping up fall camp, and there's been a lot of national media storylines coming out of this program during fall camp. You got a quarterback battle between Dante Moore and Austin Novosad. You got a true freshman wide receiver in Dakorien Moore that it sounds like he is ready to take the college football world by storm as a true freshman in 2025. The exact player that we thought this kid was when he was coming out of high school. Now, because you have those big storylines, there are a lot of other really intriguing talking points and things that we've learned about this football team during fall camp that seem to be flying under the radar. I want to take 10 to 15 minutes and talk about some other aspects of this Oregon team, some other aspects that we've learned about this team during fall camp that going to be really important for Oregon going into 2025. And, like we've said all off season long, there's a lot to figure out about this team. We all know how talented this team can be, but there's a lot to figure out, especially with how young this football team is. I think the most beneficial part about Oregon rolling into 2025 is you got some games early in the season that can almost be an extension of fall camp. And that's not me getting up here and saying Oregon can't be ready to play those games. You don't want to get got, but I think you are significantly better than a lot of the teams early on your schedule before you go on the road to Penn State, where like there are a lot of guys in the two deep that very well could be starters for this football team. You have some time to throw those players, out into the fire when the bullets are live on Saturday, kind of learn, hey, who are our best football players? Who gives us the best chance to beat teams like Penn State on the road at the end of September? So we have more time to learn about this football team, but there are some intriguing storylines coming out of fall camp that I think we got to dive a little bit deeper into. Before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, appreciate you guys. It been really fun talking this football team. The amount of support many of y'all have shown really for the last couple of years has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I do want to touch really dang quick on the quarterback battle update. It's been a kind of radio silence, at least from the coaching staff. But you talk to some sources, you talk to some people that have some knowledge about what's going on inside the building. It does sound like Dante Moore is still tracking to be the quarterback one. There are two things that excite me about this storyline. Number one, and we've talked about it, hey, it sounds like he's keeping the ball out of harm's way a little bit more, which was really the big question. Like, we know Dante Moore can elevate this offense with his arm in a significant way. We just got to make sure we're taking care of the football. Sounds like we're getting that during fall camp for Oregon. Number two, and I think another important storyline that nobody's talking about is why aren't we giving Will Stein the same respect as we're giving a lot of other offensive coordinators with first year starting quarterbacks? And you look at Ty Simpson with Ryan Grubb running that offense, and it's like, hey, Ty Simpson's going to figure it out because he's got a really good offensive coordinator. Similar conversation with Ohio State and Julian Sayin and Ryan Day. Similar conversation with Arch Manning, Coach Sark at Texas. Why aren't we talking about Will Stein like that? There has not been many better offensive coordinators in the country than Will Stein the last couple of years. Why are we not talking more about Will Stein and what he can bring out of Dante Moore going into 2025? I think we should. I think Will Stein going to be a head coach in the next 5 years. You can mark my words on that. A rising star, and that's something that is super underappreciated in terms of what Dan Lanning's doing. Dan Lanning is a charismatic guy, and it's easy to fall in love with him, and the media has fallen in love with him. What people don't talk enough about is the coaching staff that he's hired around him. I think Will Stein being one of the most important ones. I think he's one of the best in the game, and I think we need to talk more about Will Stein's impact on what Dante Moore can be at quarterback in 2025. Here's the storyline I want to get into the most because there is a growing concern about what's going to be around Dante Moore. Now, one thing nobody's talking about is this run game. This is an offensive line that's really good. This is the deepest running back room that Oregon's had. Headlined by Mekhi Hughes, but you talk about Noah Whittington, talk about Jay Harris, talk about a guy like Dayer Hill who is going to provide explosive plays as a freshman for this Oregon offense. Talk about trying to get Dante Moore settled into this offense and limiting some of those mistakes. trying to take the Superman cape off Dante Moore and say, hey, we know you can make some high level throws and we will ask you to make those high level throws, but you don't have to go out and win football games alone like you had to at UCLA. This run game is going to be a monster asset for Oregon all 2025. You got the offensive line and running backs to do it. Here's the other conversation. As much as there is some question marks about the wide receivers because you don't have a ton of returning production. You don't have a ton of proven commodities. And y'all know how I feel. I think this wide receiver room is really, really dang good. Just because they haven't necessarily produced on the football field does not mean the wide receiver room is bad. We got to talk more about this tight end position. Now, y'all know my love for Kenyon Sadiq. I think he's the best tight end in the country going into 2025. I think you're going to see more 12 personnel from this Oregon team, meaning they're going to have two tight ends on the field more than they've had in previous years for two different reasons. Number one, you do have some question marks about wide receiver, but number two, like the buzz that we're getting from Jamari Johnson coming in from the portal from Louisville, it's legit. And Jamari Johnson can be a hammer as an inline blocker because he is a very, very big tight end. But what you're hearing from Jamari Johnson is we think this kid can provide more value in the passing attack than we thought when we brought him in from Louisville. You got two, and you got a guy in Kenyon Sadiq. You can do anything you want with him. You can treat him like a wide receiver and put him out in space, and he going to be a difference maker wherever you put him. As much as we might have question marks about proven production in the wide receiver room, I think you're going to see this team lean into some more two tight end sets because it sounds like these tight ends are – we knew Kenyon Sadiq was good. It sounds like Jamari Johnson and Roger coming back from the injury sounds like they're difference makers for Oregon as well. That is, you talk about like secret weapon. There are not a lot of teams that have the ability to run their passing attack through their tight ends because they just don't have those kind of athletes. Oregon does. And for a young quarterback like Dante Moore, like having those big bodies that can work the middle, going to be huge for Dante Moore, especially early in the season while you're trying to figure out who your best wide receivers are. We got to talk more about Gary Bryant. Look, buy stock. I think that is becoming very clear. Will Stein was asked about, hey, the reporter asked Will Stein, hey, we know you got a lot of talent in the wide receiver room. Who's separating? We know it's Dakorien Moore. And I don't think Will Stein wanted to necessarily reference the true freshman. He was very quick, and I mean very quick, to shout out Gary Bryant. What excites me the most about Gary Bryant is you can use him in so many different ways, and I feel like we forget the impact that he had on this Oregon offense when he was healthy. You can put him in the slot. You can put him out wide. Will Stein said he's blocking his tail off on the perimeter. Look, with this Oregon team, there's a lot of question marks about production and known commodities in the wide receiver room. Gary Bryant's a guy that can provide that for Oregon early in the 2025 year. Once again, you talk about, hey, does Dante Moore have enough around him? Does he have some guys that he can lean on? Gary Bryant, to me, is becoming that guy during fall camp. Play him in the slot, play him on the boundary. It's not as flashy to talk about him as it is like a Dakorien Moore, Jeremiah McClellan going into year two. Gary Bryant's going to be a top 3 pass catcher on this football team in 2025, provided he stays healthy. I want to just quickly buzz some of the things that we're hearing on the defensive side of the football. Now, in the front seven, I don't have that many question marks. I think what your starting defensive line is going to be. My biggest question is, hey, who are the guys that are getting rotated in the middle of that defensive line? Is it true freshman Matthew Johnson? Is it second-year Jericho Johnson? Is it second-year Aiden Breland? That might be the story for this Oregon defense is which of those young football players who we know are very, very talented, which one of those, who are the guys that can be difference makers and who are the guys that we can rely upon in 2025? Going back to the conversation and getting over the hump. You want to win a national championship. You want to play your best football in January. You have to be deep along the lines of scrimmage. Oregon has consistently gotten better on the defensive line. We saw in 2024, that was the best version that we saw. They lacked a little bit of depth. Derek Carman had to play a lot of football. Mateo, you had to play a lot of football. Tatum had to play a lot of football. The deeper we can be, the more rotation, the more of an ability to keep guys fresh, the better we're going to be as a football team in January when it matters the most. Which of these young defense that might be the biggest storyline for me as we start 2025. Aiden Breland, if he's playing 20, 30 snaps, how does he look? Same thing for Matthew Johnson. Same thing for Jericho Johnson. I want 4 or 5 guys that I trusted at that position. I know we got 2. Who are going to be the other guys? Secondary. It might be the deepest secondary that you see in the entire country. And again, there's not a ton of known commodities, very similar to the wide receiver room. This is such a supremely talented room. Oregon's problem here is, how do we get all the best football players, our best football players, on the football field in 2025? If there's one thing that I've gotten from fall camp is that Ifio is your best cornerback. Jaleel Florence, we know, can play when healthy. Brandon Finney is becoming a guy as a true freshman. And I know everybody talked about Naheem Offord because he had 5 stars next to his name. Look, Brandon Finney in a lot of different universes was a 5-star prospect as well. Brandon Finney's becoming a guy that we need to get on the football field. If we can't get him on the football field at the boundary cornerback spot, I'm just throwing this out there because I think you have to start having this conversation, and that is, do we move Brandon Finney to that nickel corner spot? And I think I'm trying to do this live here. Is that your best? Is that your best looking secondary? I am fascinated. And Dan Lanning's always been this kind of guy. He's a player's coach. And what I mean by that is we care less about scheme and we care more about getting our best football players on the field. Brandon Finney will eventually be an NFL draft pick as a boundary cornerback. But as a true freshman, how can we get this kid on the football field year one and let him impact this football team? Is that Brandon Finney kicking a nickel? He's 6'2", 200 pounds. I know damn well that he can go support the run. What about Naheem Offord? Does he play a little bit of nickel? It's becoming pretty dang clear that Brandon Finney needs to get on the football field. Does that mean we try to put him on the football field as a nickel corner? Lot of potential combinations, and that's really the question. Is we got a lot of good players. How do we figure out to get our best ones on the football field? Because I'll say this right now, this is not an anti-Dalen Austin take. This is not an anti-Jaden Kennedy take. Like, those guys start on a lot of football teams. They're both very good football players. Brandon Finney and Naheem Offord, they have the potential to be significantly better. And if they are, you got to try to get them on the field. We'll see how it plays out. So many different combinations in the secondary, and that's what fires me up the most about this team is there's so much talent, and we got so much to learn about this team as we kick off. Like, I know those early games might not excite a ton of Oregon fans because they probably won't all be that competitive. You got to watch those games because that is how we figure out what this team can be when we go on the road to play Penn State. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.